like Iyama and Ichiriki, among others, they were playing. But Sada Atsushi is the one who beat Miyu Ting to remain in the tournament. So that was pretty impressive. And just because he's a player affiliated with Kansai Keen instead of the Nihon Keen, a lot of people are maybe not so familiar with him. But he is one of the top players of the Kansai Keen. Okay, this is a kind of a standard opening that was probably first played um, by AlphaGo. Ah, yes. Just let's stop there. Um, when you have a 3-4 point, um, even computers, they do tend to like to play an approach towards the 3-4 point, even above the 3-3 invasion. So this is a point where I wouldn't be surprised if the so-called correct move, and like it's such a subtle difference, it doesn't really matter at this point. But the correct move would probably be some kind of an approach against this cornerstone, instead of invading the 3-3 point. But a 3-3 point invasion, like it's a move you can play fairly safely. It's actually it's a very good move against the star point. It's surprisingly successful, and I think people like myself who are kind of old timers and we have a more traditional idea of how you're supposed to play the opening. Even players of my age are realizing how effective it is against the 4-4 point. But it's basically taking away the corner territory, so it's grabbing territory, but it's also important that it's taking away a base from that black stone. So it's giving white options to come into the right side in this case with aggressive ideas. So it's leaving some potential to attack. So white starts with this attachment. We can talk about the attachment here for a bit. This is a position where it's sort of like that two-space, the star point attachment against the two-space Shimari corner enclosure, which I was showing you was that Shin Minjun's game. Yes. So in this case, when black has the large knights move instead of a two-space corner enclosure, black still has 4 choices. So like when your opponent plays an attachment against your stone, it's a good idea to play a hane on the right or a hane on the left. One of these 2 hanes, or extend in one or the other directions. And so these are all moves that can be played and have been played in top players' games, strong players' games. Leonardo, I don't think people would call it rude. No, they would just think you were crazy. Okay, so yes. So another move that would be very commonly played, a very a move I would think of playing would be the hane on the left here. This is a more aggressive move, and if white pulls back here, white does have a bit of a heavy shape. So in order to move out, white will be pushing on one side or the other, and in either case, this would be strengthening black towards the right, and this would be giving black territory on the 4th line, even if black just extends. This stone on the 2nd line, it's still connected up to the corner whenever black wants to. It's just the whole thing here is very easy for black. Never mind that 9. I'm not so sure about black 9, but still. So playing it 2 is a bit heavy. Playing it here, also it's bad shape for white, with black playing a hane on top of 2 stones. That's a very successful, good shape for black. And so white's only choice really is to play here. And if black plays on the outside, white will be able to live in the corner, or in some cases, white can sacrifice and get some stones on the outside. So something like this would be giving white a good position towards the lower side of the board. This is a variation I see a lot with the computer analysis. Of course, it would be simple enough to live in the corner if white wanted to, with something like this and something like this would be another way white could live in the corner. Black usually cuts here, in which case white has a lot of stones in danger. White's going to sacrifice the stone at 2 in the 3-3 point, and is probably going to sacrifice the stone at 6, but it does want to save these 2 stones with the marked stone and white 4. So white starts with this and escapes in this direction. Plays here, and this is where it gets really complicated and branches out a bit. In general, it's something like this, where white can play a double hane at 16, and if the latter works for white, this is probably pretty good. This is actually a good direction for white to be developing. So this would be the joseki there. It was 20 moves. I realize that's a lot of moves to show in a variation, but it's a pretty much forced sequence, I would say. It's a very commonly played joseki variant. A couple of years ago, a year or so ago, you were seeing a lot of it in these international tournaments. Maybe a bit less common now. So in the game, black plays a hane underneath. In this case, white plays here. And this is, again, it's the most popular joseki. It's one that I've played a lot. And when white cuts here, white is asking, how is black going to capture that stone? So this is a kind of a sacrifice. And if black captures from this side, white gets to cover on the second line. So that would be a free forcing move, which improves white's side on the lower side. So that's what makes it very successful. To be able to play 2 would be a big gain for white. So usually black avoids that by curling around once and then playing here. So this would be a kind of a joseki variant where if we just look at the lower side, a common move would be to play here, although white might play here or play away to take the right side. Something on the right side is a big move also. Let's see. So in the game, when black plays here, let's do it with that. Yeah. The most common local move would be this one, in which case sometimes white can extend here and have some potential to be squeezing, for instance, with something like this. So there's a kind of a squeeze there. When black is captured from the other side with this marked stone, it gives white the opportunity to extend at 5 later and sort of squeeze from the other side. So that makes moves like 1 and 3 more forceful. The fact that basically white has this extension whenever white wants to, it means that black has to follow white's lead and allow white to play these forcing moves, which would make it easier for white to develop on the lower side. Of course, in this game, the left side is pretty important too. So like if we look at something like this, I mean the right side of the board, it's getting to be a very big area for black. And it's something that might be a bit worrying for white. So that would explain white's move in the game. White stopped the joseki at this point and played here. So that's a really interesting move, which was not expected. And as I was saying, like a big move here, if we look at the upper right corner, this is a really big move, which settles white's shape and takes away black's eyes. In this game, black might answer it here or could be playing something like this or this to develop towards the center. I see a lot of moves like this where black is sort of inviting white into the side and is going to dominate the center of the board while attacking. Or something like that. Sometimes it's sort of hard to explain what the computer is trying to do, even though I think I understand to a degree. So white invades the right side, and black plays here. So that's what I was talking about when I said that it would have also been a very important and big move for white to add a stone to the corner, get rid of the stuff that black is about to do. So black plays a hane here. This sets up a double hane or a cut on the second line. So this is one of the variations, and this would be the other one. If black cuts here and white takes it, then black gets to play the tari here. And if white played there, black would probably connect somewhere. I don't know, maybe here. It's one of these two. Or if white plays here, it's this trade. And even if white extends here, this one it's going to be, it's not going to be easy for white to win this fight. It's a huge fight that's going to happen in this area, and black has opportunities to win in this fight. So it's going to get complicated, and I won't be served myself. So I'll leave it here. Just the general idea that this race to capture is not going to be so easy for white. In the game, black played a double hane. So this is relatively easy to understand joseki, because it's immediately clear that white cannot do this. That's what black has set up with the hane on the second line. Black can capture the 3 stones. So white's move is limited. If white played here, then this would be bad for white because black has another forcing move here. So white pretty much has to cut on the second line. So let's go back to the game. So white has to cut on the second line here. White did play a cut on the 4th line first. And it depends on the ladder. So if black can capture in a ladder here, the local situation is working very well for black. And white played a ladder breaking move. So let's see. If black plays anything safe, like for instance like this, then white would be able to escape the ladder. So this would escape the ladder, or if black plays here, that white's going to escape the ladder in this case also. So usually black would just capture the 1 stone. So people used to play it like this. Nowadays you see them playing something towards the center of the board. It doesn't really matter. Black, it does matter, but any of these moves sort of on this diagonal will work for black. So something, in this case, maybe something like this would be a way to make the ladder work. But instead he plays the strongest local move. For the time being, it's still a ladder, just as long as black has filled a liberty here. Okay. So how is this working? Looks exciting. Yeah, so white set up a position where now the ladder is not working anymore. Yeah. So this stone at F10 is breaking the ladder. But white's given up a lot on the right side, on the left side that is. So white's given up a lot of points there. And now it's going to be a fight on the top. So let's see how that fight turns out. So black extends. Black could not capture in a ladder anymore. Let's just do the ladder. It's easy to do it on a computer. Oh, sorry. It is easy if you get into the right mode. Yeah. So that's how the ladder bumps into that white stone there at F10. So black had to extend. So the tactic worked, but white is giving up a lot of territory on the left side of the board, and giving black a strong position there. And white has lousy shape there. So the exchange on the left was locally really bad, and the only justification is that it did set up this escape from the ladder. Okay, so it looks reasonably good for black. Probably a close game. Okay, back to the game. So bamboo joint. Okay, let's just go through. So in earlier, I was talking about how this was a ladder breaking move. White escapes the ladder. And this is the key point to where black could have played here and had I shape. When white plays here, This threatens to cut, and it takes away black's eyes. So that was a key point there. Ikichin is asking about Kyokagen. That could be. I'm not sure how they chose the players, but schedule is one of the things that they consider. So it is a possibility that he's not participating because he was playing a domestic title. But it could be some others. They have a ranking system where they a rating system where they choose the players by that also. And it's interesting. We have a relatively unknown player, Sada Atsushi here. But I think the fact that he's a member of the different organizations, Kansai Keen, could be a part of it. They might have one slot there for one of their players. And he's been doing well at the top levels of tournaments in Japan. So he's coming up, and he's doing well recently. So it's a reason why he might be playing instead of, for instance, Kyokagen. So yeah, the straight answer to that question is that I don't know exactly why Kyokagen is not in this tournament. But it's good to give younger players, I think, or new players an opportunity to play, because the players who have success in international tournaments is not always the same as the players who do well in domestic tournaments. There's something there, a slight difference. So for the time being, white is okay because white can connect up to the corner. So like, for instance, if black had played here and enclosed white, white would always have the connection towards the corner and would be able to escape that way. Or if black plays here, which is usually a forcing move, I don't know about this one. I think white might actually ignore it and play something like this to cut black off in the center. And in this case, maybe white would be sacrificing the corner group, but would get a squeeze out of it. So in the game, this is what happened. And white got the territory on the right side. So that's it's more than 10 points. and had this move ready to deal with the group in the center. So if black jumps out here, white's probably going to squeeze like this. And white will be using this squeeze to strengthen the group in the center. So maybe something like this. So pretty much the same idea as what happened in the game. So in this case also, white pushes through and cuts to squeeze like this. Sacrifices the 2 stones. And is fairly strong in the center now. This was a strong move. White could have connected up on the left. But this is a point where white is taking away black's space. So any eye space in the center is gone. And strengthening white's group. It's strengthening white's group because white has this cut here. So what was the bamboo joint that someone was talking about? I don't see any bamboo joint. So I don't know. So just clarify if you want to ask the question again. Okay. So the status of everything. Probably a good idea to try to establish. So white has a territory on the right side, and I'd say that's about a bit more than 10 points. White has 5 points in the corner, almost 15 points in the upper left corner. So that's on the top side. White has 2 corners to be almost 20 points, And then if we add the right side, that's about 30 points. So white has about 30 points there, and it's just surrounded the lower side. Maybe about 20 points is at least. So white's group in the center is pretty safe, just because those black stones on the left, they're not very strong. So let's just leave that for the time being. I said white has about 50 points. So let's look at black's territory on the left. Black has close to 30 points there, and more than 10 points on the top, and about 15 points in the lower right. So black has more than 50. Black has mid 50s. It's 30, 45, 50, 55 to 60 points. So the territory is about right. But my calculation of white's territory on the lower side is 20 points, maybe a bit conservative. My feeling is that this is going well for white, so that's my gut feeling. The calculation I just made doesn't really show that very well. So maybe it's a close game. Black does have a group in the center that is not settled yet, but for the time being, it's going to be okay. It's not as if it's in any immediate danger. If black tries to attack white in the center of the board, like if black dawdles a bit, white will have this. It's actually a ladder. So white can capture the black stone there if white needs to escape with this group in the center. So that's what makes this group relatively strong. So in order to start attacking white in the center, black would need a stone here. And that means white could play something on the outside here or here. Should have no trouble making 2 ice for this group. Okay, when white plays k6. Oh, yes. I understand now. So that was actually a good question. Let's go back to that one. When black played here, this is Herv3 who was asking this question. When white played k6, this was a point where if you are familiar with good shapes, you would expect white to play a bamboo joint like this. So this is more active. It's more active towards the right side. So for instance, if white gets to play here, the bamboo joint, of course, is working well to give white a good position on the right. The reason white filled a liberty here was for that reason, basically. It's just white is filling a liberty of those black stones on the left so that white can squeeze them later. So the focus is more on black stones on the left. And black ended up playing here anyway. So if we assume black is going to play towards the center here, in this case, if black jumps out or does something like this, maybe playing here first, that bamboo joint, the difference between the bamboo joint and having a stone here, towards the right, the difference is no longer decisive. But the difference towards the left when white does something like this, having that extra liberty open, it does make a big difference. So when white played there, it was his calculation that black was going to be playing on the right in any case. So it was setting up this move that comes into the game later, after all this fighting where white played here. The fact that white has filled one of those liberties of that black group, it's what makes the squeeze we saw in the game. It also sets up a squeeze in this case. It's just so much, in this case when white has moved towards the left like this, it's just so much more effective for white to have that liberty filled so that white can squeeze next. So that was actually a very good question. It was important to show that. So I agree with white's choice there. Oh yeah, of course, it's the most popular. Okay. I had this name up already. I don't know. So yes, this is Sada's game. And it's only moved forward a few moves. So black played here. This was a direct threat to pull out this stone. This would cut white off. And so white did have to do something about it. If white had played something like this, black would still have this kind of threat. So it would still be a problem. It would cut the white group off anyway. So white just answered directly. Black extended. So with this exchange, for the time being, white doesn't have two eyes. Although, there could be an issue when white pushes through here if black covers and white plays here. You can see white does get a cut there with Sente. So there is that possibility that white will be able to do that. Yeah. Some extra potential. So some potential to capture black in the center of the board. So black's trying to set up something here. And white does not have two eyes yet. But it looks like white should be able to handle this route. It doesn't look so dangerous. Right. Okay. I think people were still asking some questions about the previous game. Black did not have any aji in the lower left corner. Oh, Risto is asking about the Gokyo Shumyo. There's a number of classical life and death or Tsumego selections, and they're sort of related. Like there were some ancient Chinese selections, which you might say they were sort of refined by Japanese players to make them fit the Japanese idea, the modern definition of life of Tsumego. So Tsumego is there's certain conventions about Tsumego. For instance, it's not considered a good Tsumego problem if there's more than one valid first move and stuff like that. And so ideally you should have the best moves for both players being limited to just one variation. Although the losing side is allowed to have variations. Usually it has to be fairly strictly. There's various levels of refinement of Tsumego problems in that way. And the ancient Chinese collections did not necessarily follow the same set of rules. So there are some very high-level collections of Chinese problems, such as Kanzufu, as we call it in Japanese, or Tsuguanzupu, or something like that in Chinese, as well as I can pronounce it, which does not follow those rules. It's just a collection of positions that the author found to be interesting, and he's demonstrating moves that are, in some cases, they're not even necessarily the best local move, but just showing basically they're more Tesuji and endgame than they are life and death, although there's a lot of good life and death problems in that also. And so there's a number of Tsumego classical collections which are basically using the same basic materials but changing them into a more modern, and like even in hundreds of years ago there was the ancient and the modern ideas about this. So they were changing them into a more modern idea of what a Tsumego collection should be. So you find problems like Gokyo Shumyo, which is relatively basic and easy to understand when you compare it to the more complicated Hatsuyoron or Kanzufu even, which is more difficult to understand. Basically, with Kanzufu, you don't even know whether it's a life and death problem or a Tesuji problem, or just something that the person thought was neat and he wanted to show it to you. You don't know that when you see the problem. So that what making it more realistically like a real game, it makes it more difficult to find the best moves also. So there's Hatsuyoron, which is extremely complicated. People have been known, professional players have been thinking about some of these problems for tens of hours. And making a professional player do that is probably part of the point of having these problem sets anyway. It's a way of a kind of a exercise we do. And so they're sort of related. There's a lot of related problems in all of these problem sets, and professional players know them to the extent that we usually recognize a problem that was in one of these classical sets. So like doing all of the Kanzufu and the Hatsuyoron and Gengen Gokyo, that's another one. That's the Japanese pronunciation. There's a Chinese pronunciation for that collection also, which I'm not so sure I know how to pronounce, so I'm not going to say it. And so doing these collections is something that people do on the way to becoming a professional. I made a point of going through all of those at least once before taking the final test, before going into the final tournament. That's one of the things I did to prepare. But I think that Antti Terminen is actually, he's talking about Gokyo Shumyo in particular, because I think he's putting out a book fairly soon about it. So that's something, or someone he knows is putting out a book. I'm not 100% that I know exactly what's going on there, but there's something about a book that's coming out in English, I believe. So you can look forward to that. Glaxobane. Go book recommendation. Let's see. There are some books that I put out. The ABCs of what was it? It's so long ago I forget the names. You should look for some of my books. Then I'd be happy. But you can probably only find them in used books because most of them are out of print. I put some books out, a couple of books out in Slate and Shell, which is it's not very active anymore. Definitely a good book for life and death is Cho-Kun's Life and Death Dictionary. So that's something you can actually find. Someone copied it onto OGS. So if you look into the puzzles collection, they do have Cho-Kun's Life and Death Dictionary. Or was it an encyclopedia? Something like that. It's very good because it goes into all of the variations of the basic shapes. Yes. And there's the pattern of the Sanensei. It's still around. And the person who made the cover of that book, I think she was just not a Go player, maybe. But the Sanensei is one line off, so it's a it's a different opening there. Okay, so the issue here is that white has to find a way to live in the center of the board. There is actually something happening in the upper right with white playing here. And okay, so let's say white plays here first. And white can play here. White can play here and here. So that's a dead shape in the center. But if white cuts here, this is actually going to capture the two black stones because black has to save the group on the right. So that would be Perfect. Actually, yeah, white would probably connect to it. This would be a complete success for white. No, nothing happening there for black. So black actually has to play some move like, I wonder where black would play. So if black plays here and white lives, then we have to figure out what's going to happen on the right side here. And actually, white's probably okay with this strategy here. So even if we say white plays here, black has only 3 liberties left, and it looks like white is going to win by 1 move. So like in this case, black would have trouble filling white's liberties. So black is going to end up playing an extra move there before filling white's liberty. So white's going to win by 1 move. So it seems to me that white can win the race to capture with 13, or if black plays something else, white can cut black off here. And actually white can play once there to start with, which might be even better. So in any case, even if black gets this forcing move, again, white actually has more than one way to win. So white could do it this way also. And white's going to win this one also. So provided white can win on the right side here, that's the problem here. White has to be able to win on the right side. Provided white can win on the right side here, white actually does have that eye there. So even though black is cut here, white can live. So just this sequence here means that black has to play something like this, and white is alive in the center of the board. So that's how that is working for white. White has that option to make 2 eyes with a move at 3. So all of this stuff is just, it's not directly relevant. It's just that white is trying to get some profit before actually doing that. What I mean is that if black had been all set on killing the white group, black did have ways to cut it off. So for instance, if black had played here, then black would be able to cut the white group off with something like this. Actually, this would be bad for white because the dame fills. So black can actually cut the white group off, but white would eventually be able to use this move to live in the center. So that's how the whole fight here was working for white. And black didn't... Of course, this whole sequence would be bad for black because black is giving white... potentially giving white some profit on the left side here. So that's why he didn't do that. Okay, it looks... I would say it looks difficult for black. Yeah, it wasn't even the Chinese opening. But you know, people make mistakes. I was a bit upset at the time. It doesn't bother me now. Well, it looks like black has invested a lot in this attack in the center and solidified white's territory on the bottom there, and is not really getting enough back. So I'd say it's a difficult game for black. But of course, the contents of the book is all about the San essay. So take a look at the territory maybe. Black's, okay, yeah, that's a big point there on the right side. Wonder if Black's should play it. Black has more than 10 points in the lower right. More than 10 points on the top side. I'd say those two territories add up to about 25 points. Maybe about 30 points on the left side. Something like that. So 55 points for Black. Yeah, the territory is pretty close. But with the big komi, I think it's going to be difficult for Black to pay the komi. It's going to be an endgame. We were talking about the Sannensei, I forget the full title. It was something about the Sannensei, my Sannensei book. That was put out by Slate and Shell. So if we assume the game is going to go on to an end game, there's a lot of areas of the board that are pretty much finished. So this whole area in the center, White probably still needs to okay, White played in the lower right. So that's a big move. White does seem to have a slight advantage in territory. Okay, so this was a big move that it would have been Sente from White also. So I was thinking actually White might have done that. Actually, White could play here, and if Black answers, maybe he was afraid Black would play on this side though. If Black answers here, then this becomes a forcing move. So this is a big move from White also. Maybe it works better after White has played this. So that would explain the order of moves. And if Black plays somewhere else, White can play here. And this is actually threatening to play here and save the stones. So it would be a forcing move for White. It's forcing for Black also. So this is an important endgame move. And And as far as endgame moves are concerned, I'd say this is a big move. This is a big move. And everything else is starting to get fairly small. Like there's moves in this area, they might be forcing for black, but it's not going to change the status quo very much. So white has something close to 25 points on the lower side already. And so black plays here. So this is cutting off white's group in the center, and white will have to do something about that. So if white plays something like this, white still cannot escape. So there's two problems with trying to escape. One being that white has a shortage of liberties here, and so it's not working that side. And there's also the fact that black can at any point capture this stone and escape in that direction. So it's just too easy for black. So white doesn't have anything locally, and we'll have to white will eventually have to make an eye here. So this is the move. It's just the order of moves that white chooses. Maybe white will start with this and something like this. Or white can start with this and it would still be able to live. So this would be alive. One way or the other. Thank you, Derek. So white will live in the center, and then the game will return to the end game. Actually, this position here is probably better for white to not play the cut here and leave the dame open. So white could get this exchange, and this would help white slightly towards the lower side. Provided white doesn't play this exchange. White doesn't want to fill that liberty. So after that, white could play here, or could play here to make a living shape. Or maybe white should do that just immediately. Yeah. Maybe it's better not to play that exchange. I'd say Sada is still hanging in there, although it is a difficult game for him at this point. I would rather to play with white at this point in the game. But I'm not sure that it's a decisive advantage. Hmm. Yes, 018 is a big move because, okay, I think he was trying to decide whether or not to push through here. So this is a move that white sort of wants to try. I'm not sure. It sort of depends on various things. So I'm actually not sure that it's working. So what happens if black plays here is the question. And so white would not be able to answer that because the whole group would be in danger. So white's not able to answer it, but maybe it's okay for white to um, play something like this and get some points back on this side. So black's not really gaining anything. I think that's the plan when white pushes through here. And white wanted to get that exchange before playing here so that white can follow up later with a cut here. And sometimes white gets to reduce black's territory on it. So maybe something like this might happen where white gets to reduce black's territory a little bit. So he was looking at this sequence, and I think he just wanted to get this, trying to decide whether it was more advantageous to play this pushing move first. And that was probably what was taking so much time for his move there. Oh, great, Gabriel, thank you. I got a present from Gabriel. So now white is alive in the center due to the fact that white does have the cut here. So because of that cut, black cannot go after white's group in the center. So back to the end game. Yes. So someone was asking about W. Zhang is asking why this is better than a move like this. So this is a huge move that is double sente. It's a sente whether you play it with white or black. But if white simply plays here, black will probably invade or attach here. So there's this weakness on the lower side, which was probably more important. And also the fact that if white starts with this move, white would hope to play this exchange first and then cover here. This would probably be good for white to be able to do that. But again, white's probably afraid that black's going to do something like this, curl around. And white doesn't have time to make any use of the stones in the corners. It's not going to work. Black dominates the outside already. And so white would end up backing off and maybe not gaining enough on the other side. So something like this, white's losing more points. So that's why covering at 2 or 018 was a really big move. So we're caught up. Yes, this is a forcing move. And white has to live in the center now. So they're finished with the fighting. They're into an end game. And it's just the end game now. It's interesting how strong players pause at this point, where it's obvious that white can live in the center, and it's obvious that white needs to add a stone to that group. He's still has to think about whether he wants to play any more forcing moves before he does so. So when you see Tang Weixing posing like this when the next move to live seems obvious. So like white could play here or here or here. Wherever white plays, it's very easy for white to make a living shape. But he does have to think about whether he wants to play some forcing moves first. So for instance, white could play this forcing exchange. Is it profitable or not? White could play a forcing exchange here, with white gaining anything with that exchange. And it's things that are worthwhile for white to be thinking about. He might end up deciding not to play any of these moves because there's gives and takes. There's bad things happening. For instance, if white plays this way, black gets to capture these white stones on the left. So that stone at 4 is maybe more valuable than the white stone at 3. But it's something that he's thinking about. He's deciding whether to play any forcing moves or not. Okay. Someone is asking about the end game. The center, the right part of the center, you can see white groups poking out into it from the bottom and from the right side, and black's groups in the center and in the lower right corner. So it's going to be very difficult for anyone to make any territory in the center. It's conceivable that black would, for instance, play moves like this to reduce white, or a move like this maybe. So this is just about as far as I would expect black can get into the white territory. Unless black tries something a bit more exciting like this. Stuff like this is it's a shape move. So it's a kind of a tesuji, but probably not going to work in this board position. So for instance, it's probably going to die. So maybe a bit too deep. So while moves like this could conceivably be played, it's not as if there's a huge amount of territory involved here. And it's more important to take Senta. And this is clearly a big endgame move. This is something that I would be hurrying to play. And white would probably even answer it. Moves like this are also really big. So for white, moves like this are big because they set up the clamp. So if white clamps here and black goes down and white cuts, this is not looking good for black, because if black cuts here, that's a double Atari that is finishing the game. So white can actually cut at 12 and capture the 2 black stones. So this clamping at 10 is a big follow-up move to the 4 and 6 move. So that's a big endgame move. So while black, it's probably worthwhile to play this exchange and reinforce black's group in the center. But after that, definitely moves like this or moves like this are biggest. And black will only play moves like this as a sente move on the way. Unless black tries to find something a bit more desperately exciting. This looks like it could black. This is has more potential than the other move I was showing. Oh, are professionals generally equally good at the end game? That's a question from David Bird. Yes, to a certain degree. For instance, there are some players who are better. So, for instance, Shinjin So he tends to gain a little bit in the end game, even towards the end. So, um, there are degrees of being good that are more subtle than the difference between professionals and amateur players, which is there's a huge difference there, usually. Um, but otherwise, I would say that there is a difference, but it's more difficult for people to um, recognize, to understand. And so, and it's also it's not so much local positions or finding the best local move, but calculating the entire board. For instance, in a position like this, or actually, this is pretty far into the end game already. So let's see how many moves have we. It's still something like 100. It's 142 moves so far. So we're still in the middle of the game. Probably about 100 moves left. It's still a bit early for players to be actually reading it out. Although there are some historical games where the players claimed to have figured it out after something like over 100 moves or something like that. So there are some games where the player actually claimed that he had figured it out. In that game, it was probably about 200 moves before the end of the game, um, which is conceivable, but it's not likely. It's definitely not going to happen in a game with a time control such as this game has. But the grasp of the overall position, and in a position like this, the choice of whether you can continue playing normal moves, as you might say, or you have to play slightly aggressively and try for an extra in a game like this, which apparently is fairly close. Dose plays is telling us that his Katago thinks there's a half point win for white, which means that black can turn it around with just 1 point. So maybe black is going to be playing okay, playing the normal end game and hoping for white to make a mistake. Um, but no, I don't think Chochkin actually claimed that. He rather has a very good. The top players are very good at judging the score. They're not actually reading out the whole sequence, but their positional judgment is good enough that they can choose whether to play normally or submissively or solidly or actively and try just for a little bit extra. And so this game is probably an example of a position where I'm willing to accept the computer analysis that apparently says that white is slightly ahead. My feeling is that white has a slight lead, but it's probably close enough that black could play a normal endgame, and a very subtle mistake would can still turn the game around. Whereas if you find that the game is a bit further away, and you're losing by a larger margin than you thought, then you can play something a bit more drastic. And at this point, it's so calm actually that it would be hard to find that kind of a challenge for white. Okay, so the next move, I would expect it to be in the lower left corner or the upper left corner. So one of these two. Yeah, this is probably straight up the biggest move, but this one is a big move too, just because it does leave the clamp. And so if black thought that he had to do something more than that, then he would be thinking about moves like this. So this is actually a tesuji. It's a good shape move that um, seems to have some potential to work. So if white captures the one stone, This is going to be good for, well, it's going to work in any case. So it's going to work to a certain degree. If we assume this is forcing, it's not forcing maybe, but it's still not easy for black. Yeah. So this one it's not so easy, but ideally it can work to a degree. Maybe black has to play the Atari here. Or if white plays here though, in this case maybe it's not going to work so well. And white's probably going to win that one. Yeah, so it's just difficult for black to make this work. So he played a normal endgame. Yes, so we have I have two ideas here. So first of all, playing here would be the normal way to answer that, and black would get to this side. So if white plays here, white does have a nice follow-up move there. I think I just want to focus on this one game for the rest of the live stream. So white did play away this point on the left, and black took the one stone. White plays the clamp. So white does have a bit of a weak position here on the lower side. So I was showing this move. Maybe a bit awkward. Maybe better for black to play here. So if white answers that, it's going to be a ko. And here, sometimes white can escape in this direction. Actually, black can capture most of it. But yeah, even if white can escape in this direction, there's going to be trouble on this side, assuming black has enough ko threats. And also, when black captures at 5, that's going to set up this move. So this clamp that white has just played, it sort of depends on the fact that white could play a double Atari there. So going back to that position, the fact that white had this double Atari. And so if black starts on this side, and white ends up playing on Atari here, that's going to destroy the potential gain that white gained there. In fact, black would probably continue on this side. So this is a point where this relatively close game could sort of erupt into a big ko fight here. Oh, hello, Rick. I have not played against Sada. So yes, it's the fact that he's in an organization that's based in Osaka, which is West Japan. And so there's a bit of difference there, and I would have to do better in the tournaments to be playing against him, because basically the two different organizations cooperate to play these domestic tournaments in Japan. but they partly because of the cost of traveling back and forth, we start playing against each other at the final stages of the tournaments. So I wouldn't be playing him in the first elimination rounds. I would have to be getting into the final stages of the tournament, and I haven't done that recently. So that's why I'm not playing him. Because Sada actually he's been in the final stages of some of the tournaments. And he's getting up there. He's in good form. So this situation on the left side where black cannot play here because of the double Atari and doesn't want to play here just because that's giving away the whole side. It does make black want to do something with the center position here. So black really wants to. I think his thinking should be focused on this idea, with the ko starting here in the lower left. It's a dangerous ko for white. Black does have some ko threats. So yes. It's hard to say how this is going to turn out. Is R15 a move for white at some point? R15 is a move. So yeah, that's something that it's probably not very relevant to the board position. So what I mean is that it is a move. And it does gain a little bit, but not really a lot. So it's not a big deal. And sorry. First of all, if black wants to, he can play this as a forcing endgame at any point. So that's it's usually played by black. And also there's the fact that even in that case, white can always play the forcing move from this side. So white does have some endgame here with this forcing move. Sometimes it's just better to play this forcing move, which does get the endgame there on the lower side. So this is maybe actually a better endgame move, which will forestall black from black playing this move was also big. It's not going to be forcing at this time of the game. So this endgame on the lower side is sometimes more important to be played. Just because this squeezes the black group. So yeah, in fact, black would have to choose between one of these two moves. I think the lower right is sort of borderline. It might not be forcing. So answering that question, does white have valid ko threats in the lower right, is something I wasn't really ready to do because it requires a good estimate of the entire board score, you might say. So when white plays here, and we have this kind of a trade, I would have to assess the whole board position to really know. So maybe something like this. So One answer to that would be I don't know, or I could say, yeah, it's just when black seems to have a lot of co-threats, so maybe black's gonna answer it rather than go this way. It is worth something like 20 points in the corner. So it's sort of borderline. It's a difficult question. Like f17 would have been f17. F17? Doesn't make sense to me. If white were to play on the bottom, for instance, at some point, white could have played here, and that would have solved all of white's local problems. And then black would play here. So that would maybe be a bit too submissive. Like if white had enough territory, it would be okay. But I don't think so. So they're going to fight the ko. I would assume they're going to fight the ko. It's taking a bit of time for black to make the decision. But I think black does have to try playing the ko here. Okay, and the variation where black starts the ko. Let's try that one. I still don't see how f17 would be. And f17 still doesn't seem to be a very useful move. Okay. Dose Plays is giving us some information from his Katago, I believe. So it looks like it's this variation. And then the ko. Yes, I think the black will have to play this ko at some point. So yeah, I would just go straight at it. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's what he's thinking about right now. Oh, he played this one. So this is the other way to try to attack white, and it's not as strongly attacking. So in this case, black did gain a little territory on the side, but has no way to deal with this on the left. So black still cannot play this one. And so let's just borrow that variation. It's going to be something like this. And maybe black won't finish that way. So maybe black will just leave it now and capture. No, it doesn't look like it's going to work. Maybe something like this. So they're into the final stages of the endgame, almost. They avoided that final ko. Okay. I thought he would answer on the lower side. Okay, so black can peep here now. And this looks big. D10. Running with D10. Ah, escaping with that stone is probably not so big. I don't know. Hmm. It could have some potential. In the lower left versus the left middle trade-off. I think it was maybe about even. Um, Probably close to even, actually. It's hard to count these weird trades sometimes. Okay, that should do it. Okay, I'm back. Okay, what White was trying to do here it was so if Black escapes, let's do that one. So if black escapes, I would probably start with this move. And if black takes this one, white can squeeze like this. So that's what I would do. So maybe black will play here, and something like this happens. And white can play an Atari here, and capture the 3 black stones. So that this is capturing the 3 black stones here. So this is what white is trying to accomplish here. And so black answered on the other side. So this is going to sacrifice those 2 stones and save the rest of the group. So yeah, maybe play an Atari first. White can capture the two stones, but it's just those 2 stones. Might be worthwhile for black to be playing something like this. Okay, so it didn't turn out that way. Someone was suggesting pulling out with that white stone, wasn't? I wonder who it was. I remember someone in the chat was suggesting this one. So white escapes here. Black does have to be a bit careful because this group here is cut off. So black will have to make some eyes for it. Hmm. And for the time being, black has to make sure this group that black has in the center is not going to die. So for instance, to demonstrate that, if black plays something like this, and let's see, so white plays here, then let's see, the whole black group there is going to die. So black has to be careful of that. And so for instance, could play something like this, and then black would be alive. So maybe something like this. Yes. So the 3 black stones, they're probably okay. So there's a bit of a ko-aji here, some potential there. So if black plays this variation, and white tries to, first of all, this Atari saves the 3 stones in this case. And if white plays here, this is actually going to be a ko. But it's a ko that's sort of dangerous for white too, because if black wins the ko, then everything dies. So that's a huge profit for black also. I'm not sure that white would want to do this kind of thing. So it might be a bit too dangerous for white. Okay. So black played the Atari and answered on this, is going to answer on this side. Once he's played this, it means he's going to play here. So how does that save the black group? Let's see. I don't completely understand this. So this is the board position. And so if black connects here, I wonder what would happen with this variation. So this looks just bad for black. But if he cannot connect there, then he's in trouble. So I have trouble understanding this final Atari that black has played. So like, in this case, it would still be a potential ko there with, if black plays on this side, black's alive in the center, and white can play here. This is a case where it was better for black not to play that move at b12, b11, because white can get a ko here without as much loss as before. It's still a ko though, so white could do this one, and it's slightly better for black probably not to have played that move. So I was expecting black to play here to live in the center. And then black could play this when needed. It's still forcing, still big enough. But playing this, it doesn't change the fact that maybe white's not going to play that ko after all. So what I mean is that when black plays here, if white plays this one, this is still a ko that ends up with white's group being an Atari. So when black finishes the ko, that's a clump of 5 white stones that's an Atari, and white has lost territory locally. So maybe white's not going to play that ko anyway. In which case, playing the Atari on the second line didn't make much difference. So it was okay. This was still okay for black, but I don't understand this move. So he continued with the Atari here. And so I still don't understand how this move at D13 is functioning. It looks like it's a collapse for black, actually. I was sort of rooting for Sada Atsushi, but once he's played this Atari at D13, it looks pretty hopeless. Rather suddenly, actually, because if he plays here, white plays here, and squeezes like this. So it might have been some kind of a misconception, because he doesn't have anything on this side either. And at this point, white would just play on the outside and capture. The problem with black's Atari here is that it's filling one of black's liberties. So if black plays on this side, this is no longer a ko. It's just dead. So that's how filling that liberty was bad for black. And that was just an oversight, a hallucination, or whatever you want to call it. It was misreading. I think he might have just simply made some elementary mistake, like thinking that the Atari at 5 would save his group or something like that. Just some completely Like there's no explanation for these mistakes that people make. Um, it's like it's not really logical. It's just that's what the meaning of the oversight is, I suppose. So after playing that move, I'd say it's just a question of time before he resigns. So yeah, that's a bit disappointing. I think he could have continued to play if he had just simply played this one and captured made a living shape. It does seem to be difficult for Japan, for black that is, but it's still a fairly close game. Once he's played this, there's no way to save the center and this position on the left at the same time. He's filled his own liberty and created a hopeless shape. So I think we're coming to an end here. He might be thinking of resigning, actually. Let's see if I can... The other server seems to be a bit quicker. Oh, still playing. Okay, black can do that. And so this is kind of an interesting shape where I think the better way to squeeze is to play here. Although white can also squeeze like this. This is also a way that white can squeeze. And black still has the same problem as that he has to play here and he also has to play on this side. But the Tetsuji is to play here, and if black takes to squeeze like this. So this is the Tetsuji. And if black takes on this side, white can push from this side. And black's in a lot of trouble. Now black has one more group that can be captured. So this is even worse. So he did that one, yes. Yes, if G15 had been Sente, then it would have made a difference. So if black could have played this move at some time, the fact is it's never Sente, but yeah. If black could have played that, then he would have had this way to connect up. So no problem in this case. But unfortunately, it's never Sente. Okay, so after white played there, my app is a bit, yeah. Yes, at this point, it's getting hopeless. In my 15-minute break, I was taking a quick look at some of the other games. It seems that Korea is doing very well in this tournament. So most of the games seem to be pretty decisively winning for Korea, the Korean player. So I think there's about 6 games that are Korea versus China out of the 8 games in this best 16. So if we just look at the computer analysis of those games at this point, I think that maybe China's going to be lucky to get 1 win out of all of the games. So most 1 or 2 wins for China. This looks like it's going to be a win for China. So this one. Okay, so with this move, black has saved the left side, and white is playing this sequence in the center. This is just some extra security for the white stones in the area. So by making sure of this squeeze here, white is strengthening all of the white stones on the lower part of the board, just by having that squeeze already started. And when white does it, if black plays it out, then it's going to end up in gote. So this is something that black cannot afford to do. Black doesn't have time to do this. And the fact that white is squeezing black here, it gives some extra security to all of white's stones on the lower half of the board. So black can't afford to spin that move. Black will have to play on this side to live here. And white can capture these. So in this case, white's going to capture these stones. And so that's it for today. With this move, Sada Atsushi resigned, and I'm going to end my commentaries at this point. I did touch some other games, but this is the main game that I wanted to do, and it's getting a bit late. I'm sure everyone has to go to sleep now. So I'm going to finish the live commentary, and see you next time. So next time the Chunlan Cup comes along, I haven't checked the schedule, but I'll do my best to be there to do the commentary. So thanks for everyone for hanging in to the end. Late into the night for some people. And I hope to see you next. And like the video if you liked it. So it does make a difference. So thank you. And subscribe to my channel. Okay, thanks. Goodbye.